Lu Jinian heard the footsteps behind him grow further and further away, until in the end, they completely disappeared. Then his body went limp and he dropped to the chair beside him, as though all his strength had been drained. All he could think of was every detail of what had just transpired once more. 2 months pregnant. An intrauterine fetal death. It was like Lu Jinian was in a nightmare. His consciousness was only filled with those words. Qianhao was pregnant. Pregnant for 2 months now. 2 more months, and they'd have known the sex of the baby. 8 more months, and the baby would have been born. A year and 8 months later, the baby would have been waddling in front of him, mumbling "Daddy" to him. Such a beautiful thing. Yet how could such a beautiful thing come to such a devastatingly tragic end? His child. Qianhao and his child. How did the baby die in the womb? Lu Jinian finally couldn't help but lower his head, and bring his hand to cover his face. His shoulders began to tremble, and a warm liquid trickled down from between his fingers. Their child, how did the baby die? Unless it's because he's an illegitimate son that shouldn't exist on this earth. But did his child need to be punished? The assistant downstairs suddenly remembered that he forgot to give Lu Jinian Qianhao's operation forms, and so he went back up again. Just as he came out of the elevator, he saw someone sitting on his own in the long corridor. Even though they were quite a distance apart, he saw that the man, who had covered his face, sat with his shoulders trembling. In that instant, the assistant froze on the spot and didn't dare walk forward. He quietly looked for a long time, but didn't disturb the miserable, distressed man equals. He only silently retreated into the elevator, as though he hadn't been there at all, hadn't seen a thing, and left. He had been following Lu Jinian for over 7 years. In these long 7 years, he had already married and had a kid. Yet, Lu Jinian, who was older than him by a year, had been all alone in the world. He was also curious of whether Lu Jinian actually had a woman he liked. That was until over half a year ago, when Lu Jinian promised the Shaw family to be Shaw Jiamu's replacement. At the time, he was strongly against it. After all, it was practically nonsense. But the moment he saw Miss Qiao, that's when he knew Lu Jinian wasn't actually all alone in this world. He already had someone he loved. The assistant believed that no one in this world understood Lu Jinian more than he did. He always knew that his background wasn't good, and he was an illegitimate child. Though he looked arrogant, cold, a lone wolf, virtuous and condescending, in fact, everyone saw he has a poor attitude. But who would have thought that although there were 2 sons of the Shaw family, one was a young master with the world around his fingers, and the other had the lowest standing in society. Without relatives or anyone to care for him, he relied on his own hard work to survive his teens. The only reason why he looked like he was heartless was actually because he didn't want anyone to see his pitiful and weak side. The assistant believed that no one in this world could make Lu Jinian feel warmth inside, besides Miss Qiao. Otherwise, when the man wasn't paying attention, he wouldn't have caught him staring at Miss Qiao, in a daze. Now that the baby was lost, he must be devastated beyond belief.